And welcome to episode 30 of Bank to the Future Live. We've got a very special guest, two very special guests today, and a very special announcement. So we just recently sent out an email. So hopefully you're joining after receiving that email, but we have made a strategic investment in Diacle. And so this episode of Bank to the Future Live is all about understanding a bit of a background on Diacle, meeting the founders and the CEO, and going into what it means for you as investors and what potential it opens up in the securities token market. So just before we introduce Adam Vaziri and John Thompson from the Diacle team, I'm just going to give a few updates and then we'll jump straight into the team. So firstly, if you've got a question that you'd like to ask of any of us, maybe you're doing this or you're watching this on Twitter, then use the hashtag BFLive to get our attention. We've got Famida moderating as usual, and the rest of the team will be looking out for your comments, and we can take your live questions once we get round to the Q&A. If you're on Telegram, we set up our Telegram group during our token sale, and therefore the handle for our Telegram is at BF_token. But that's where most of our community is, and you can ask questions in there and we'll pull them out for the Telegram. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, then use the live chat, and Adam and Famida will be there, and John as well, so we can pick out some of your questions. Famida will bring them up and use the live chat. If you're watching the recording, feel free to leave a comment, and we'll try to go back to that and cover it as we go live each and every week on Bank to the Future Live. For those of you that are new to the show, that are appearing and joining us for the first time, thank you. I cover a lot of things on crypto, banking, the economy, and more political stuff on my personal Twitter. But this show is just for our Bank to the Future community, our BF wallet users, our Bank to the Future token holders, our BnkToTheFuture.com investors, or our portfolio companies that are looking to raise funding and do disruptive things in the world of financial technology. And this is a show just for 1 hour where we bring you all Bank to the Future news, all updates, new things that are happening, new features, new pitches, and go through everything and answer your questions. So in terms of updates, just before we go through, in terms of pitches live at the moment, we've got 3 pitches live with 4 more on the way. As stated in previous episodes, we are just switching our card payment provider. So at the moment, most of the pitches, when you go to them, they're crypto only, Bitcoin or Ethereum. But also remember to use the new banking partnership integration. You can put funds on your Bank to the Future account using our banking partnership. You can make a wire, and once those appear on your account, you can use those to allocate to any pitch on BnkToTheFuture.com. We've currently got Concrete, who are in the security token space. You'll notice a theme that a lot of the deals that we're working with are doing stuff in the security token space. As stated in previous episodes, at Bank to the Future, we were ahead of many of the trends. We were bringing to you many of the exchanges before they became big and the big crypto boom. And those that were investing before the trend were the ones that got the highest valuation increases. This is not financial advice. You have to do your own research. You have to make your own assessment. But we're seeing a similar thing in the security token market, where we're looking to bring to you the deals before the security token market becomes a big thing. And hopefully you can diversify across many of the players that are doing stuff there. We've got Concrete, who have a platform for real estate tokenization, having already run a successful equity crowdfunding platform for real estate based out of Australia and registered with ASIC. We have DX Exchange, which are allowing for the tokenization of stocks and shares, ETFs, and have also launched their own tokens, which have inbuilt leverage. So rather than having to borrow money and go long and short on an exchange, they allow you to get exposure to cryptocurrencies with leverage all built into the token. And we've also got Edge. Airbits was what they originally were. And they were an early wallet in the cryptocurrency industry. And they're launching their Series A round after securing investment from Finbucci Capital and BitMEX Ventures. And everybody, it's a qualifying investor on Bank to the Future, can check out those deals. Also, we got 4 more deals. I'm not going to announce those yet. We are still in the process of getting the US side so that we can get the US deals signed off. As we said, we had to switch our escrow account provider in order to comply with US regulations. And so once we've got that sorted, we can then open these deals up to the US and get them signed off by the broker dealer. And don't forget that our secondary market is where you can buy and sell some of the more established companies in crypto. We've got the blockchain.com SPV, we've got the BitPay SPV, we've got the Kraken SPV, we've got the Circle SPV, and the Bitfinex SPV, and the Ripple Labs SPV. Just a quick reminder of how that works. You're not buying and selling shares in the company. We hold shares through a special SPV, and we allow qualifying investors to buy and sell on those markets through the secondary market to gain exposure to some of the largest and most valuable companies in crypto. Before we head over to the interview, just a couple of portfolio news updates. We just made on our blog the Diacle announcement live, so we're going to be going through that in much more detail today. Also, a couple of interesting updates from Coinbase, one of our portfolio companies. They made an announcement. It was a bit cryptic. I think it was at the Consensus Invest conference, where they're potentially launching their IEO platform. For those of you that know your Bank to the Future history, our broker dealer was a company called Keystone Capital Corporation that we invested in, and we ended up they were acquired by Coinbase. And I'm assuming that that broker dealer is going to be how they're going to do their IEO platform for both security tokens. We welcome all players into the space because we think that the more liquidity, the more opportunities to build the ecosystem, the more that the security token ecosystem can grow. Also, one of our other portfolio companies, Telegram, they are just around the corner from releasing the Gram tokens, and we're going to be having an update from the team next week to explore what's happening with the token issuance and the next steps with Telegram. So those are all the main updates that I wanted to bring to you. And now I want to head over to our special guests. We've got John Thompson, who's the CEO of Diacle, and Adam Vaziri, who is the founder of Diacle. I've known Adam for a long time. We've got a deep history, so I'm really excited that we managed to put this deal together. You may not have come across Adam yet. He does speak at many, many conferences around the world. He's been involved in Bitcoin and crypto. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going off my memory. I think he was in around 2012. And we met very early in the crypto scene when we were actually advocating for the growth of Bitcoin around about 2012, 2013. I can't remember exactly when we did meet. It was in the UK. And at the time, Adam was involved in consulting through the UK Digital Currency Association, the tax authorities on how to make the more favorable tax structures, as it were, for how they treat cryptocurrencies. And the very first tax authority, if memory serves me right, to actually come up and make a public release was Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs in the UK, HMRC. And Adam was actually instrumental in guiding and making sure that more favorable tax treatments were actually put through. He was also a founding director alongside myself in the UK Digital Currency Association, which was a group that was set up to support and really lobby together and make sure that more favorable policies were implemented in the UK in order to support the growth of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in the startup ecosystem. Adam has been a consultant to Bank to the Future and Diacle, providing different services at different times. And one thing that I would like to bring to the attention of why Diacle is such, well, maybe not a commonly known brand, but they've actually been involved in some of the most instrumental deals in our industry behind the scenes. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to bring credit to some of the things that they've actually achieved. As an organization, they were responsible on working with crypto facilities in order to achieve the first crypto futures market license with a regulator. I believe it was the FCA, and that was later sold to Kraken for 100 million or so, which has led to the growth of their futures market. They were also involved in one of the very first regulated initial coin offerings, which was for Cardano, that went on to raise $50 million, I believe. They were also involved in securing one of the first payment licenses for one of our portfolio companies, BitPayzer, and they got their money service license in order to serve using crypto remittances across emerging markets in the African continent and emerging markets. And also more recently, they were involved in helping Quanta get the very first license for a lottery, a national lottery, based in the Isle of Man, working with the Isle of Man gaming regulators. I might have butchered a few of those things, and hopefully Adam and John can correct me if I got some of those wrong. But it was for these reasons why we were working with Diacle through our portfolio companies as well as personally. We wanted to take our partnership to the next level. We've decided to make a significant strategic investment so that we can align our team's visions in supporting the growth of the security token market, and also expand our suite of services that we can offer to financial technology companies by having tokenized corporate finance advisory services by working with Diacle as one of our exclusive EU partners there. So that's the intro. And Adam, I guess maybe there was a few things I got wrong, but let's start with you. Maybe you could fill in some of the gaps and give some details on how you got involved in crypto.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Simon. It's a pleasure to be on the show. And this is a really great day for us to be working again together on the crypto market. As Simon said, you know, I started out in 2012. I qualified as a lawyer. I was working in technology first, and then I moved into compliance. And when I discovered Bitcoin, at the time I was working on managing regulatory affairs and compliance and licensing for different types of companies and new businesses. And so when I discovered Bitcoin, I decided to establish Diacle. And there was no other service at the time that was supporting Bitcoin startups with meeting regulatory requirements or understanding, achieving some level of business certainty for them. I mean, simple questions such as, you know, Simon mentioned about taxation, you know, no one had an answer whether capital gains tax or income tax would apply to, you know, mining proceeds and things like that. So it was a concerted effort in assisting these companies in trying to achieve clarity. And Diacle actually means compass, which is the view that we're trying to assist people in new areas where there aren't necessarily obvious answers, but trying to find those answers by working with policymakers, working with regulators to make that environment for business a lot more certain. And so, as you know, Simon was mentioning, we worked on a number of different businesses to achieve what had never been done before. No one had thought about not using SWIFT to do money remittance, rather than using money remittance using Bitcoin. And there were no regulations to address that at the time. And so it required someone that had a strategic understanding, but also a deep understanding of the technology to be able to assist regulators in understanding the space. And that was our role in Diacle, to bridge the gap between the traditional mindset of regulated services and transpose that into the new era of crypto. And we've been working on that. It's not a few years, it's now 5 years almost that we've been doing this. And corporate finance has been quite a large element of what we've been doing, assisting companies in achieving where at the time when people were doing initial coin offerings and not considering AML or KYC or other regulatory considerations, we were working with companies to establish the first regulated token offerings, ensuring that you could go ahead and do this innovative way of raising money, but at the same time not compromise yourselves from a compliance standpoint. In other words, build long-term value in the proposition. And so we managed to do that with Cardano, managed to do that with many other projects of this nature. And for me, like the culmination of all of this is to now support effectively an appointed representative of a regulated body in the UK, formally with corporate finance in the area of security tokens. And to start that process by providing a tokenization platform and increasing to security tokens and ensuring that there is significant liquidity that enters into the market. And that's our mission. And so Bank to the Future, Simon, you've been working hard on that area and, doing things in a manner that achieves regulatory compliance. And we're totally aligned in terms of that vision. And so by us partnering together, we're going to achieve a lot more. So yeah, I'm very excited about the partnership, and I have John Thompson, who's an experienced financial professional working in insurance and other regulated areas, that has the operational experience to be able to run a regulated company and be able to scale this regulated service that we intend to provide, and working in step with the Bank to the Future team, which is something I'm really looking forward to.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you. So maybe John, this is a good time to intro yourself, and then I do want to unpack some of those things and go a bit deeper in, because I do think the reasons why founders get involved in this industry is really instrumental, because what we've found, throughout in cryptocurrency, it's very volatile depending on the price. And what we do is we have mountains of people join us during a bull market, and then just as many, well, not, a few more go out during the bear market. And so I think the reasons why people get involved is really an indication into their longevity of navigating the growth of a company. And so I would like to unpack a bit more of that with Adam. But John, why don't you just give us a bit of background on like how you got involved in Diacle and what you see as the major opportunity, why you wanted to move your career in this direction?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon. As I just want to echo what Adam said. Yeah, we're very excited to be working with Bank to the Future as a strategic investor. So a bit about me. Yep, I come from a financial services background. I did some very exciting things as an aeronautical engineer. That was my background. And then, as most people do in starting off in their careers, I took a complete 360 and went in the other direction, or 180 and went in the other direction, and decided to go into financial services. I started out as a trainee actuary, working in the pensions area, worked for companies like Lloyd's TSB, and then moved to work with Royal London, where I ran a couple of their branches in bringing out their propositions, moving later into the sales field. After getting a bit fed up with that side of things, I decided to open up my own financial advisory firm as an independent financial advisor, meeting the public as I had been doing, meeting financial advisors and helping them with their propositions and business. And then I'd known Adam for a number of years, probably at least 15, 16 years. And we spoke on several different aspects. And the more I learned about the blockchain industry, the more excited I got about it. And, spoke to him about different ways that I might be able to work with Diacle. And I became an advisor about 18 months ago at Diacle. And then earlier on this year became the CEO, because I'm very excited about where the business is going and what work I could do with the experience that I had in the financial and regulatory markets to support that.
Yeah, and having worked with you, John, I've seen, when we've been working with some of the clients together, your ability to take out the details, structure things, and just really put together structures in a very complex environment where you're sometimes trying to package a strange investment product into something that regulators can understand, so that then they can translate it and it can get through to the next stage. John's got a very unique ability with that. So that was we've worked together on a few deals recently where we were really excited to see that. So I think it was a very good choice bringing you in. Adam, I do want to go back to the beginning. Why did you want, what was it about Bitcoin in 2012 that made you decide to take such a big turn? What is it that you saw in Bitcoin in 2012 that made you decide to be involved in something that really everyone just would call you crazy for being involved in at that time?
Well, I mean, the fact is everyone did say I was crazy. And, you know, at the time, cryptocurrency, but going out and going full force into that industry, which was practically non-existent. But what for me was the trigger was seeing a system that had no central control, but that it worked. That there was no one person responsible, that there was no one person who administers the system, and yet it works. There's no Mr. Bitcoin and there's no Bitcoin Limited, and yet people can use the system. They can store value. People may argue that it's volatile, they can still store value and they can transfer that value. So you end up with an effective decentralized payment system. And when you witness that and you see it and it is alive in front of you, you can't really unthink that, you can't unsee it. And then you have to view everything else, all financial systems that have billions of dollars of revenue behind them, government supporting them, and, you know, payment systems that have existed for decades, archaic. And yet those are the rails that this whole financial system has existed on, and that there has not been an alternative. And so when you see Bitcoin, that it exists and that there's no way of shutting it down, you are presented with a truth, and it becomes an alternative. And so for me, what inspires me even more about Bitcoin, inspires me at the time, is that anyone, anywhere in the world, regardless of their background, regardless of whether they have a passport, a national ID, or don't have a national ID, or, you know, they're unbanked, can access the same quality of technology. And that's what Bitcoin provides. There's no, I'm sorry, we don't deal with your jurisdiction, or I'm sorry, you know, we can't service your market because we don't have a bank branch in your particular village in India. No, if you have an internet connection, then you have access. And it should be as simple as that. Governments talk about financial inclusion, but Bitcoin does it by default. And, you know, I think that's the point. I think when you witness phenomena and it has truth behind it, you can't unwitness it. And then of course your imagination goes from there. And your imagination thinks, well, I'm a lawyer, I'm in compliance. I want to bring that faster into the market. I want to drive that disruption into the market as fast as possible and to accelerate that disruption. And so for me, the biggest thing was helping those businesses introduce effectively a mirror image of the traditional financial world and regulated world, but in a crypto world. And for them to be just as regulated and just as credible, but running on crypto and running without Swift and running without the traditional systems supporting them. So for me, it was about driving that change into the market and finding any means possible to affect that. You know, for example, I realized that KYC, know your client, was a huge barrier for compliance. So, you know, for me, it was about raising funds to invest in companies that can address that challenge and lowering the barrier for startups to enter into that field, because compliance is such a humongous barrier to entry for any, you know, for any startup. So for me, it's all about access and leveraging disruption into the market and doing it fast before it loses wind. But the greatest thing about Bitcoin is that it had its own steam. You know, as soon as it took off, there was high speculation. I was there in the peaks, I was there in the troughs. Didn't really make much difference to me. All I saw was that some of my clients, unfortunately, couldn't raise any further funding. And so when when their imagination themselves had to think about, well, how can I do this if Bitcoin price is down and I still need to raise funding to pay my employees? And then they invented the ICO. Well, that's just, to me, building a completely alternative system. And that inspired me even more to assist those companies, but to do it in a regulated manner, because you want to raise money, you want to do things in an innovative manner, but that doesn't mean that you need to compromise on regulations. That you can do and follow regulations without necessarily minimizing the disruptive effect in the industry. So it's about bridging those divides and with the objective of one replacing the other, or one driving the other.
Awesome, Adam. So one thing I think I know you for is the RegTech guy. Whenever there is a regulation, I always think of Adam can figure out how to turn that into technology to make that process more seamless, more easy, and more effective. Where do you see this going as a future vision? Do you think we could enter a world where regulations are just simply enforced by technology and code? Or do you think that there's always going to be this need? Do you think that's where blockchain takes us? That regulations just can become code?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most exciting thing about RegTech is that it's without RegTech, you don't really have FinTech. So, for example, like a company like Revolut or some of these challenger banks, they're not able to be branchless without having regulatory technology to allow people to onboard remotely. So you have to have an alignment between regulatory technology in order to accelerate the disruption of FinTech. That is kind of the prerequisite towards moving towards greater FinTech penetration in the market. Now, how can you programmatically turn regulations into code? Well, you have now money that can be programmed with Bitcoin and any kind of blockchain-based financial asset. So you can construct rules that allow for that enforcement of regulations within those smart contracts, meaning that some of the, let's say, primary areas where breaches may occur do not need to occur. So you end up with prevention rather than remedial work, which is often done by regulators because they find out about breaches much later. The LIBOR crisis, for example, there's many years before that came to light because there's a delay between action and consequences. Whereas when you have blockchain, action and consequence is one, and you can see it on a ledger that everyone else shares in terms of the truth. So that creates, if you want, the foundations for you to be able to programmatically embed regulations. But for me, that's really absolutely necessary in order for FinTech really to reach its zenith. Without that investment in RegTech, you are not going to have great ideas that will reach the market because they'll meet with hurdles. And a way of bringing products into the market by avoiding regulations is not particularly sustainable. That only lasts for a particular time, maybe. But the way of really bringing it in a sustainable manner is by investing in the RegTech to then provide the foundation for those FinTech disruptive ideas.
Yeah, well, I've always thought that the one thing that Bitcoin does is it kind of regulates the regulator in a sense, where if you have an exit from traditional finance, it can make the traditional finance system more honest, more fair, more because it's competing with an exit. And so by having this decentralized technology that produces a new alternative, And then you have all these companies that are doing things in a centralized way, but with decentralized technology, giving all these regulatory technology, opportunities to do things cheaper, faster, more securely. In the end, you get a better financial system plus an alternative that can operate outside of the traditional system, which is an ultra exciting time, especially in times when we're going to have more and more financial uncertainty and more political uncertainty that's driving financial uncertainty as the traditional markets start to show some of those flaws, like you talked about, that are hidden in the system because of the nature of and the way that they operate and the way they've been regulated over time. So, I mean, that's producing more and more investment opportunities and turn this, this niche at Bank to the Future of supporting the future of finance and fintech companies into a plethora of lots and lots of different opportunities. I see some big trends in terms of the ability to no longer have to share your KYC, eventually just be able to have your own identity and be able to control that, much like you can control your own money with Bitcoin now. And many other areas that are going to come through. Switching gears slightly, so let's do one final question for Adam, and then we'll switch to more the vision of what Diacle is going to be working on next and how we can work together better and what we can share with people. And then we'll open up to the live chat and take some of the questions that Famida's been pulling out. The final question I have for you is, it seems like the next really big focus for you is the technology and infrastructure around the security token ecosystem. So the security token ecosystem very much reminds me of the ICO ecosystem. In 2013, there was, and Adam will remember, there was all this talk around colored coins, whereby you could take assets, you could build them upon Bitcoin, and everyone was ultra excited about the disruption of capital markets and stock markets. Prior to that, there were a couple of companies like the Global, I forget the name. There was one in the UK that got shut down by the FBI, I think, the Global Blockchain Stock Exchange or something. And then there was crypto stocks. And they believed because it was done on top of Bitcoin, it wasn't a security. They eventually got shut down. But in 2013, you had this incredible excitement around colored coins. And then you had the first ICO with Mastercoin, and Vitalik got, it was interested in the project and then couldn't get the code changes needed on Bitcoin. So later went on to create Ethereum that went on to become, that later led to ERC20 tokens. But it wasn't until 2017 it had deep liquidity. So it was from 2013 to 2017. So that's approximately 4 to 5 years. Until we went from inception to liquidity. I think there's going to be a similar thing happening with security tokens. Everyone got excited about security tokens in 2018. In 2019, a lot of the building is happening. But I think if we take that use case, then we could expect deep liquidity around 2022, 2023. So what do you see, do you think we're at the very beginning of yet another huge crypto trend with security tokens? Or do you think a lot of people are spending a lot of time working on something that right now has just no liquidity? And what's it going to take in order to get to liquidity?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely believe in security tokens as a market, and one which is only really nascent in that regard. We're only really seeing the start of what is possible with security tokens. And, we talked about RegTech and FinTech. Well, a security token is basically a combination of regulatory technology and financial technology. And that is basically the synthesis of, the two things that, are great about blockchain and great about Bitcoin, but also great about financial markets, and combining all of those together. So for me, I'm very bullish on security tokens as a market in general. But the problem is, because it is regulated, and it is regulated already at a local level, that you end up with fragmentation. And no markets are good if they're fragmented, because liquidity needs to be pooled in one area. And the more liquidity there is, the more confidence people feel with particular assets. If we create these tiny pockets of liquidity all around the world that only have a couple of $1,000 in volume per asset, then it wouldn't have achieved much security tokens. Security tokens should be global by nature, as they are. They are running on blockchain rails, so they must be global by nature. And they must be transferable globally by nature. And to make that possible is going to require somewhat of an expansive view around businesses that establish themselves. They're going to need to spread themselves out internationally in order to be able to capture those local markets, which are, as I said, fragmented. But that's only the first level of fragmentation that we see at the moment. The other layer is because people are somewhat unsure about the security token market, that they want to own it all. So they want to be very horizontal as a business. They want to be able to do the issuing, the exchange. They want to be doing the advisory. They want to be doing all of the technology. They want to be the standard for the security token all in one package. And the problem with that is what you're doing is you're creating a walled garden. If you can well in the exchange and the issuing, then how is your liquidity going to be shared with other people's liquidity? So what's needed to address that particular area of fragmentation, and that's very much taking a practical view, is standards. So I've been working with the British Standards Institution to bring together a consortium of people within the security token industry to create a technical standard, not a governance standard, not looking at the regulatory side because that's already dealt with, but a technical standard for security tokens. So you end up with, if you want, a JavaScript language for security tokens that everyone can write in the same language and end up with the same product that can be easily understood by everyone in the industry. So whether you're establishing, when you've got a wallet or an exchange or anything else, that you can understand what you're dealing with and onboard that asset. So for me, it's breaking down those areas of fragmentation. But inevitably, the reason why it's slow is because this is a regulated market. But as soon as people adopt fairly expansive business models that cover numerous jurisdictions and can pool the liquidity and share technically the same format of security tokens, you'll start to see the emergence of these security tokens and the liquidity behind them. But that's only one area. For me, that's only like small cap startups. That's very interesting. Then you have funds, the tokenization of closed-ended funds. That's also very interesting, and creating liquidity around that and programmatically paying out dividends and all of that efficiency that comes with it, and offering a level of transparency about how funds are being used. But another layer of it is about open access. For me, it's about taking conventional financial instruments that are very difficult to distribute, that are locally broken up locally into different markets, and creating that universal format in a security token and providing distribution through that mechanism, which I think will achieve much greater access than we have seen currently with other financial services. If you want to go and set up an account with to trade on NASDAQ, well, you need to go and find a broker, and well, you've got to find a broker in the first place. It's all very complicated and lots of barriers, and it's about breaking down those barriers. And so there's another conventional market that can be tokenized and increasing the access. So in all, I'm very bullish, but the fragmentation is just a natural phenomenon from this more complicated field, and the fact that people are being somewhat possessive about how they're introducing their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the investment theses at BnkToTheFuture.com was that we're happy to work on the technology. We look to drive forward the ecosystem, but we also want to invest in the companies that can do it with us as well, because we don't see this as something we can achieve on our own. If all we did was create, another New York Stock Exchange, Tokyo Stock Exchange, and Shanghai Stock Exchange, and people have to go to one of those jurisdictions and pick their market, then we just create the same thing again. However, if an issuer can come along and say, there is this token, and that token can be traded on any one of these exchanges that's either operated by, any of these institutions and organizations. But if I don't like it on the New York Stock Exchange, and I can withdraw my token and I can put it on the Tokyo Stock Exchange or the Bank to the Future Exchange or Coinbase or wherever it goes. And that was really one of the beauties of the growth of the crypto market, was when there was lots of exchanges that were all competing for liquidity, but also they weren't really competing because it created arbitrage opportunities between exchanges, efficient markets. And this is one of the things that needs to get right, why those standards are so important. So let's switch over to John now slightly, and move over to the next phases for Diacle. So you've been involved in all of this financial innovation. You've done, as an organization, so many firsts and work with so many companies in order to really move things forward. What do you see as your next area of focus at Diacle? And then I guess that can lead into some of the opportunities that why we invested and why we can strategically work together on other things. So John, over to you. Where do you see things going next with Diacle, and what are the trends you're going to be working on?
Sure. I see, I think first of all, I see kind of embedding our foundations in more of the projects and more of the companies that we've been working with. So what do I mean by that? Core to Diacle has always been regulation, legals, design and architecture. So helping firms do that. So I see that as being more of what we'll continue to do. Instead of being known in smaller pockets for what we do, we see scalability in that side of things. Obviously, in working with Bank to the Future, we see the security tokens market, as you've kind of described, taking off and growing and developing, and we're obviously very excited at being able to grow that. So we see more projects in that area where companies are looking to look at different areas. So whether that be real estate or instruments, as some of the things that we've kind of seen, or art, those types of projects, innovative ways of taking traditional assets and tokenizing, fractionalizing them. And we see those markets as being great opportunities for people to invest in, and we look forward to working in those markets. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so,
just to add to what John was saying, Diacle will be introducing a platform of its own, which is a tokenization platform. So all of the projects that require, they want to do a security token offering, they'll be able to use the Diacle tokenization system to distribute their tokens. And that is a highly scalable system with embedded RegTech, so it's extremely fast and very easy to use. And then it's about building the synergy between what Bank to the Future is doing and what Diacle is doing. But all of the projects, whether they're large funds or whether they're small cap businesses, startups, they'll all be going through the Diacle tokenization system.
Awesome. Yeah. So a couple of things that we're really excited about. The first is recently we've noticed that there was a trend towards wanting to, the ICO brought this about really, that there is a trend to want to raise finance outside of the platform. And so one of the things we've been working on Bank to the Future is taking many of the systems and processes that we've developed in terms of know your customer, in terms of anti-money laundering, in terms of transaction monitoring, all the things you have to do as a regulated company, in terms of global security law compliance, onboarding with bespoke to different jurisdictions, onboarding via a regulated institution where that is required. And so we've been developing the Bank to the Future identity solution that we've talked about on other episodes of Bank to the Future Live. And immediately we'll get started on an integration between Diacle, so that when people want to do these security token offerings, the Bank to the Future identity solution, that can be used beyond the Bank to the Future platform, so that it can be used by other platforms as well. We're initially going to be integrating with BF Exchange through the altcoin.io acquisition that we announced several weeks back. and integrating Diacle into the Bank to the Future identity, so that people can seamlessly onboard through regulated institutions, and be able to do that, and integrate with lots of different partners in order to do that, so that this liquidity can be shared and grown and used for the growth of the ecosystem. So we're really excited about that. Also, Diacle have got their own roadmap in terms of regulatory licenses that they will be applying for. And the goal is that as Diacle expands their suite of licenses, then we'll be able to integrate that into the Bank to the Future platform as well, so that we can open up to a more wider pool of investors. And also, when we get all these deals that are coming through, they need advisory work, they need structuring work, they need tokenization. One of the strengths that we have is that our community of 87,000 qualifying investors, so we can help with the distribution, and we can create solutions, but being able to have and partner with someone like Diacle that will be able to open us up to a much wider pool of investors as their licenses and abilities to do that expands, is really exciting stuff, as well as being able to send much of the advisory work over there, so that people can actually do these issuances, and then they can qualify later to get onto Bank to the Future once they're ready for distribution. So it's really exciting, and we come from a similar mindset whereby we're happy to support other companies, invest in other companies, and try to plug together different parts of the ecosystem, rather than coming from a mindset of trying to create, a silo of trying to capture all the value in one organization, and spread this across the ecosystem so we can see it grow and make an impact in financial services as the disruption goes bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think we've hogged about 45 minutes of the time. So Famida, perhaps you've picked out some questions from the live chat, and we can pick up some of those questions and do some Q&A for either myself or the team.
All right, so I do have a few questions here, but if you have answered them already in a roundabout way through your introduction, sorry, but I think it would be good to have a breakdown afterwards, because we do timestamps in our videos. So first question to both Adam and John is, can non-accredited investors or low net worth investors invest?
Well, at the moment, Diacle is an authorized representative and is only able to accept accredited investors when arranging deals in investments. But as Simon mentioned, we'll be applying for licenses to be able to cover a wider pool of investors.
Cool, thank you. How has your experience been so far while working with the regulators?
Yeah, I mean, I've personally dealt with regulators for some time now, 6 years. I would say that my experience has always been positive. Regulators actually, don't really want to hinder the process so much. And especially now, they're embracing innovation and technology much more than ever before. The invention of the sandbox and other mechanisms to create a forum by which the regulator can communicate with startups that have innovative ways of achieving the same type of business model, but in a completely different way. So my experience has always been positive, and I've always managed to explain what we intend to do, how we intend to do it, and how we intend to comply with their rules.
Cool. Yeah. John, did you want to say something?
I'd echo much the same. My experience with regulators has been quite positive. I find that once they get to the nub of what it is that you're trying to achieve, they're very open in discussing that, especially with the FCA and the unbound regulator, especially. We see that great progress in regulators collaborating. We've seen several of those collaborations happen across the world, where, say, the UK is collaborating with the UAE on putting regulation together and speaking to other European countries and doing the same. So I can only see that being a positive thing for both us and for them.
I got a follow-on question, if I may, for me, that comes from that. There's a perception, if you're in the US, that the ICO and the token sale is dead, and that everything is a security, and therefore everything's going to shift over to security tokens. Is that the case for the rest of the world? I remember having a chat with you, Adam, about you said that recently the FCA released some guidance, and your interpretation of it, that it's very much that these tokens can exist outside of being securities. So is the token sale dead, or is it just a non-US game?
I love the question. Token sales are absolutely not dead. And there is a huge distinction between the US interpretation of securities with the rest of the world. In the United States, anything could be a security. I could sell a contract, of any nature, and it could be perceived to be a security if the context of that transaction is one where the person entering into the contract expecting a return. So for tokens, especially newly minted tokens, most people are going into that probably with an expectation of a return. And, there's the 5-prong test and the Howey test and all of these different precedent-based categorization that you have in the United States that creates a lot of ambiguity. So in the end, people just say, well, everything is a security. But that's not the case in the rest of the world. Well, probably the same because the United States has an extraterritorial influence on the rest of the world when it comes to regulations, but that's not the case. And the UK FCA has made it abundantly clear that if you're talking just about cryptocurrency, that it is a cryptocurrency, whether it be newly minted or whether it exists, it is a cryptocurrency. It is a new asset. It is not to be lumped together with traditional definitions of specified investments. And I totally believe that that's the right way of thinking about this. ICOs, IEOs are new modes of finance for business. They are not just another security token, security offering. They are a new mode of finance, and it will remain, and it should remain the same. And that's why we've seen, even after the ICO boom, that you had the IEO boom, where the exchanges are taking on board more risk, providing more due diligence, but that's still thriving. Obviously not as much as the ICO, but I definitely don't think that that's going away anytime soon. And I expect the businesses in the future will be doing ICOs, and they'll be doing STOs, IPOs, all different modes of finance. And better to have more modes of finance than less if you're a startup and you're trying to raise capital. So there is a huge distinction between the US mindset and the rest of the world. And the FCA has been abundantly clear that there is that distinction. And if you look at their recent paper, they said people have criticized the FCA for taking the stance and not following the US as if it was a standard. But they, emphasized that you're talking about completely two bodies of law, histories of interpretation of law, and that you can't just lump it all into one.
Thank you very much for that amazing answer there. Following on, have one more question. I think time for one more question, which is, which country do you think is most suitable for crypto in terms of regulations?
Well, my personal opinion is, just looking at the environment over the course of 5-6 years, which I try to see how things have been progressing. A country like Japan was very forward thinking, but then again, they reacted to the Mt. Gox fiasco. But they stepped up and they introduced regulations and they started to regulate the exchanges. And even with that environment in place, it did not prevent the coin check hack and $1 billion going missing. So they were very forward thinking, Japan, in doing that. Other countries like Malta have really, just gone at it, completely covering every aspect of crypto business activity that could be regulated and defining it, cataloging it, and making it so clear for businesses that want to go go ahead and do that. But personally, my preference is currently at the moment how the UK is taking this. It's been watching the area, it's taken its time, it's looked at the experience from working in the sandbox and other things, and said, okay, well, pragmatically, these are the things that we think should be prioritized, and giving business certainty effectively to businesses that want to establish or do ICOs or whatever it may be. Of course, then you have Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, of course, is pioneer when it came to the ICO and became a hub essentially for a certain type of finance activity. But I mean, numerous countries, and it really depends, I would say, on the business model that the business is undertaking, because every country has prioritized the area of regulation differently. And it depends on whether they're doing an ICO, IEO, or STO, and how they want that to be characterized. So there's a lot of different considerations when determining which country, because it's dependent on what product.
Yeah, and I just want to add that please don't use any of this as legal advice. Adam is not your lawyer unless you engage him. And don't use this as financial advice. Please do your own research. This is for information purposes only. We can't be guiding you in a certain direction when it comes to where you allocate your capital and certain investments and stuff. So just putting that out there. And I think it would be very rude of me on the first time on Bank to the Future Live that we've had an all Brit show, not to ask the question and the word that is haunting most people in Britain at the moment. But does crypto care about Brexit?
Yeah, that's a great one. Definitely not.
Okay. Honey Badger don't care.
I think not, and I would say I think not, because innovation trumps politics in most cases. I think businesses will find a way through. You know, most businesses that are involved in cryptos and blockchains are SMEs largely, and they define hugely the power and the strength of people to find ways through regulation, to find ways through politics, because they want to survive and thrive and grow. And I think that's just categorized by the crypto industry, blockchain industry. So I say not, because they will find a way through, which is what they're doing currently right now.
Okay, and if I never hear the word Brexit again, it will be too soon. So thank you everybody for joining the show on our first all Brit Bank to the Future Live. Thanks Adam and John for joining us from the Diacle team. We can't wait to reveal more about how we can work together, what this means to our investors, what this means to our community. We're really looking forward to working on the growth of the security token ecosystem and just bringing more opportunities to our investors and our financial technology companies that are looking to change the world of finance forever. So that's going to do it for episode 30 of Bank to the Future Live. If you're watching this recording, please do share, please do like, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you hit the bell symbol when you subscribe, then YouTube will notify you each and every time we go live. We'll be here next week for episode 31 of Bank to the Future Live. And thank you for the moderation and the great questions, Famida. And if you are part of any of our communities, whether it's Telegram, hashtag BF Live on Twitter, then let us know your questions, let us know what you'd like to see, and we'll endeavor to bring guests on or cover that next week. And that's going to do it for episode 30 of Bank to the Future Live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.